we often think of Casper, or we think of those paranormal activity shows that talk about,
Yeah.
oh, well, you've got nice ghosts, or this is the ghost of a child, and you can communicate with them. You can leave them toys, and they can be you friendly and interacting. And when we actually understand the demonic and supernatural realm, we recognize, wait a second, there are no nice ghosts. Casper does not
Yeah.
exist. However,
Right.
the demonic realm does exist.
So I wonder if you remember watching something like Sabrina the Teenage Witch or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Charmed on TV. More than likely, you've seen the entire Harry Potter series. Am I right? But did you ever take any interest in those shows and actually investigate for yourself the world of the occult? And did you know that occult involvement is on the rise, especially the younger that you are? Well, today's guest is going to explain to us what has led to the rise of the occult and how we as Christians should respond to it. So grab a cup of coffee and settle in, because you do not want to miss this supernaturally interesting episode of Voices of WIA. Voices of WIA is just one of the many ways that Women in Apologetics strives to educate, equip, and encourage women in Christian apologetics. So if you love Voices of WIA, then I invite you to join our free email community, where you will receive apologetics resources every single week and enjoy email community-only benefits like exclusive digital guides and a discount to our annual conference, which is always a super special kind of thing to attend. So you can sign up today by visiting womeninapologetics.com/email-community. You are going to get so much information from our guest today. Amy and her husband, Mike, are both Air Force veterans and have a heart for helping parents and kids love God with their minds. Together, they are raising 3 boys and a little girl in Texas in a little house overflowing with noise and fun. And when she's not talking apologetics, she enjoys staying up late at night, reading and visiting antique stores during the day. Plus, she has a general weakness for comedies and for Earl Grey tea. Amy, thank you so much for joining us on our show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Lori.
Yeah, you are so welcome. Okay, I know this is not necessarily on anybody's radar, but I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Tell us briefly what you did in the Air Force and kind of what drew you to it.
Yeah, so I was in logistics. So I supplied aircraft parts to AWACS, A-10s, and F-16s during my time in service. It was something that I was drawn to just to be able to sort of launch into adulthood. I graduated high school and really didn't know exactly what I wanted to study. I wanted to go in more of the meteorological realm to chase tornadoes, but I didn't want my parents to have to pay for college. So my friend for 6 months straight talked about the Air Force and how excited she was to join. And I just looked at her one day in shop class. I was like, okay, do they have a meteorological department? And she goes, yes. I go, okay, cool. I'll join. And that was it. Like I was in. And so I joined at 17, left for basic at 18. And it was funny because God took my love for tornadoes and all things meteorological and used it to guide me to theology, eventually apologetics, meeting my husband. It's just amazing how God will take the things that we
Yeah.
love to steer us to where exactly he wants us to be.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that story. Did you happen to grow up in Oklahoma? Is that why you love tornadoes?
No, I didn't grow up there. I actually got stationed there. So I'm from Washington State, Pacific Northwest, and I was actually supposed to be stationed like at MacDill Air Force Base, which from what I've heard is like white sandy beaches of Florida. I mean, gorgeous, right? And I traded with a girl for Oklahoma. I mean, who does that? Just so I could see tornadoes. And I was there for 2.5 years and I didn't see one. I got it. It was funny. I was actually driving to the airport to leave for Germany and I got a dust devil it spun up right in front of me. And I'm like, really, Lord, that's all I get is a dust devil. And
Oh,
that was the closest I came to seeing an actual tornado.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. I love that so much because I did grow up in Oklahoma. I've seen lots of them, typically from the bottom of a closet or a bathroom. And so, anyway, I love that story because I grew up loving tornadoes too, being scared of them, healthy respect for them, but
Right.
loving them because they were so fascinating. So, I did not know we were such kindred spirits. That is
Oh,
so
you
so
know,
good to know.
we can chase tornadoes one day.
You bet. Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Okay. So before we talk about the reasons why the interest and involvement in the cult is on the rise, I feel like most of our listeners and viewers could really benefit from an explanation of what the word occult refers to. So, can you take just a few minutes to kind of straighten that out just so everybody will know what page we're on?
And that's actually kind of hard to do because it is so broad. By nature, occult, it means like hidden, supernatural, anything that's secret. It typically is like esoteric knowledge. I mean, if
Mhm.
you've ever even tried to look for, if you had a metaphysics class and you actually went to the metaphysics side of like Barnes and Noble, typically you're going to get occult instead of philosophy. And so it's this study of sort of this hidden, secret knowledge. It has anything to do with the supernatural, specifically with regards to maybe witchcraft. There's some things that
Mhm.
even Satanism can play into there. It's the use of crystals, herbs, basically any way to use nature and the sort of pantheistic view of this divine divinity that's in all things, and to be able to channel that and use that to accomplish your own will in some way, shape, or form. That's the occult. We often think of it in terms of, like I mentioned, crystals, herbs,
Mhm.
tarot cards, all of those sorts of things are all wrapped into this idea that you can tap into the supernatural to now control the world around you.
Okay, that is really helpful because when I think of the occult, I think of black and candles and like the whole, black trash bag kind of thing, kind
Right.
of draped along the walls. But it could be something much more simple than that and much more everyday and ordinary than that. Just the idea of trying to find some sort of supernatural element in the mundane through which you get those powers essentially to work for you. Is that a working
Yeah, no,
definition?
and I no, and that makes sense because I think in the 90s, like the occult was very much a hot topic. It
True.
was like you could pretty much pick it out if somebody was wearing all black, maybe had a bunch of piercings, a whole bunch of eyeshadow. But actually, the occult, it is very aesthetically beautiful. I mean, some of these tea houses that I've actually been into just on accident. I'm looking around. I'm like, well, wait a second. I mean, there's so many herbs, flowers. It's very organic. Sometimes, I mean, like I said, it's beautiful when we think of the crystals, the herbs, the plants that are being involved. So it's actually very aesthetically pleasing. And in fact, there's a whole branch of Instagram, social media in general, that is just how you can have sort of this occult like aesthetic within your home. And so much of it,
Mm,
it's very attractive, it's very
yeah.
herbal. It really speaks to people who are more maybe drawn to the organic, the nature realm, which is where, a lot of people are finding interest in it.
Well, that actually makes so much sense just from a biblical perspective because so many, especially in the Old Testament, well, in the New Testament too, there was an awful lot of pagan occultic kind of religions, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. If it's just basically some version of accessing nature and getting nature to do what you want it to do, it makes sense that everybody without the kind of history that Israel did, without the kind of connection to God that they had, that would be kind of just a natural thing to attempt to do, I suppose. So that's really helpful, I think, because like I said, I always saw it as the big bad spooky kind of thing, but that's not necessarily representative of the whole occultic
No,
movement,
not at
apparently.
all.
Okay, that is very good to know. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, because I think this is a big deal, and I don't even think I realized that. And I did a little bit of research onto the occult, but I grew up in a very fundamentalist church,
Mm,
which was super helpful in helping me to see that our God, the biblical God, is really the one true God, which to me meant that things like ghosts and seances and witches weren't real things. So
mm.
I understood the world of the occult to be make believe, but that's not necessarily a true statement, is it?
No, it's not. And that old quote from Kevin Spacey in The Usual Suspects comes to mind. He said, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist." And
Right.
I think sometimes the pushback was, "Oh, this is all make believe. This is fake." And yes, that depends on how you define it. Like when we
Right.
think of make believe, we think of Harry Potter. Like yes,
Yeah.
that is fake, but that is actually not the occult. It can maybe reflect maybe just a small certain aspects of of it, but that's not
Mhm.
actually what we mean when we think of the occult or ghosts or seances and that sort of thing. And that's where I think Satan has really flourished in sort of his evangelistic strategy when it comes to the
Yeah.
occult, because this stuff does exist, but not in perhaps the way in which we understand it. For example, ghosts, we often think of Casper, or we think of those paranormal activity shows that talk about,
Yeah.
oh, well, you've got nice ghosts, or this is the ghost of a child, and you can communicate with them. You can leave them toys, and they can be you friendly and interacting. And when we actually understand the demonic and supernatural realm, we recognize, wait a second, there are no nice ghosts. Casper does not
Yeah.
exist. However,
Right.
the demonic realm does exist. And what you're interacting with is not the ghost of your grandma or the ghost of some 18th century child. This is, in fact, a demon who's actually trying to draw you away from God. And when we think of all of the ways in which people are told to interact with these individuals, it always
Mm.
ends up boiling down to a form of religion. Oh, give them certain toys, give them their own little space. You can talk to them. Okay, why are we
Ugh.
engaging in fellowship here? Or like
Mm.
with witchcraft. Yes, witchcraft also, but that's tied into the demonic realm as well. It's that subtle twisting of we are no longer worshiping the creator, we're now
Mm.
worshiping the creation. And then when we can have pop influences from social stars, I think of Taylor Swift. She recently went through sort of this witch era.
Mhm.
Here you have this incredibly talented, very attractive young woman who is now promoting it to her followers as something that's fun and interesting and playful and not anything you're supposed to be scared of. Oh my gosh, how many people did that speak to be like, oh, well, maybe I should look into this. And then even just, I think of articles within Cosmo or Teen Vogue, how, oh, witchcraft is now a way that you can harness some power in your own life, bring about your love that you're looking for. It's even a way that you can use things that you already like to discern if you are a witch. Like if you enjoy lighting candles and having certain smells and scents in your bath time, well, that's almost like a cleaning ritual. You may actually be a witch. And so it's this subtle exploitation of perhaps things that we already love or truths, as in like the creations of the creator within nature, but it's an exploitation to draw us away from God.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as you were talking, I was thinking, I can't remember if it's Spurgeon or Chesterton, but one of them said that when a people stops believing in God, it's not that they believe in nothing; they'll believe in almost anything, and
Yeah.
that's what that reminds me of. We're
Mm.
all so hungry for something spiritual and something beyond ourselves. If we don't fill that gap with the true God, we will fill it, like you said, with the demonic and not even really know it.
Yeah.
Which brings me actually to my next question. How is it you seem to be very comfortable talking about this kind of thing and familiar with this kind of thing? So, how is it that you are familiar with the occult? What can you share with us about your personal experience that might really help us to understand what it's like, what might draw people to it, and they
Mm.
can expect? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I actually dabbled in the occult in Wicca, specifically Celtic magic within high school. So I was one of these, I wasn't really raised within the church. It just wasn't something that we did very frequently.
Mhm.
And so I had kind of on my own been looking at God. We occasionally would go to youth group, that sort of thing. And I remember in 10th grade English, beginning of the year, our teacher would have each student stand up and introduce themselves and share something about themselves. And there was a student, she stood up and she just gushed about how much she loved Jesus and how church was the most important thing to her relationship with Christ, all of these things for several minutes. And yet, this same girl and her friends were so horrific to me in the lunchroom. They would just, oh, Amy, you're so ugly. You're so worthless. What are you even here? Just completely degrading,
No.
belittling. And I was watching her testimony and I was thinking, if that's what a Christian is, I don't want any part of
Oh
Christianity. I don't
no.
want Christians, any of that. And so I was sharing my frustrations with my friends at the lunch table. And when you're kind of an outsider, right? Like high school is very cliquey. Like the only
Sure.
group that would be okay with me hanging out happened to be the sort of like outcast Wiccan group. And so they were listening and they're like, well, Amy, those passages in the Bible denouncing witchcraft were actually added later by the church followers to persecute Wiccans. And I'm like, really? Like, I didn't know that this was false at the time. It just sounded good. They were the only ones that had answers. They're like, well, yeah, well, Amy, and your last name that actually has Scottish origins. I'm like, oh, yeah, we are Scottish. And they're like, well, actually, Celtic, the Druid faith, that's actually more authentic to who you
Mm.
are. In fact, you should really look into that. And Amy, don't you already love nature? And I'm like, yes, I do. I love being outside. I love being in the woods. It's just where I felt at peace, comfortable. And they're like, well, that's actually confirmation that you should be looking into this sort of stuff. And you might actually be a witch if you felt sort of outside and sort of othered by this space, but yet you have this connection with the natural realm. Why don't you look into that? And so, as a vulnerable teenager who had just witnessed a very terrible representation of what I
Mm.
perceived to be Christ, and now
Mhm.
being met by someone who's actually recognizing me for who I am, who's saying that I'm okay to hang out with them, and then actually pointing me to this other religion that already spoke into things that I actually liked. I'm like, well, let me look into this Wicca thing. And so I completely walked away from God for a solid year and pursued hard after Wicca. I mean, I was buying
Wow.
the spell books. I had, crystals and herbs and everything just sort of hidden off in my room because I mean, teenagers were super good at being sneaky, and I was really diving in it. But that whole year, what really frustrated me is I could not silence this still small voice in the back of my head that would just every now and then go, this isn't right. This isn't true.
Wow.
And I knew who
Wow.
that was, but I was pushing him away because I'm like, "No, I know you. I saw what God is like, and I don't wanna have
Right.
anything to do with it." And, within Wicca, you can call yourself a witch if you have been pursuing after it and studying it and on this path for a year and a day. And it was the 1 year mark that I was sitting there looking at my spell books and looking at my Bible and thinking, what if I got this wrong? What if I didn't actually encounter Christianity the way that it was supposed to be, or who I thought I
Mm.
saw Jesus? Maybe that wasn't actually Jesus. And so I'm like, let me give this Christianity thing one last try. Let me look into it. And so I started reading scripture, and it just hit me that I had it all wrong, and that the misrepresentation of who Christ is not actually Christ. And that when the word of God is misused, it doesn't mean we reject the word of God. We need to go back to it and see what it actually says. And that day, I burnt all my spell books. I think I broke my dad's grill. Actually, I burnt him in his grill. Um, and I walked away from Wicca and have been following after Christ ever since. And so it's one of those things to where when you understand perhaps the reasons why people seek after it, they're looking for control, they're looking for power, they're looking for a place to fit in, they're looking for something that doesn't feel judgy or condemning,
Yeah.
or some of those misrepresentations of Christianity that we see in
Mhm.
culture. That's part of the allure that draws people,
Yes.
is it offers that control, but it ultimately does not deliver on anything that it promises.
Yes, not to mention, I think, Jim Wallace talks about this a lot, but we are all fallen, and our fallen nature will naturally gravitate toward anything besides
Yeah.
Jesus,
Yeah.
first. It will happily take any other substitute besides Jesus, simply because we're unregenerate. And there's something about that. There's something about that cosmic authority problem that manages to push a lot of people away into all sorts of directions. We would almost, I mean, I know every time I've ever listened to a podcast about someone coming from something else to
Yeah.
Jesus, they've almost gone through the whole list of any
Mm.
other option. Christianity is always the last thing they try in most cases. So yeah, I want to go back though. First of all, I just hate this. There's a lot of really good lessons there about the fact that this one girl stands up and talks about how much she loves Jesus,
Yeah.
but then her behavior is so poor at the same time. I would almost think that you would, if you're going to be so bold as to say something like that, you'd make sure you weren't turning people away. But
Yeah.
that's clearly what she did. And what a significant testimony it is to you that you were willing to say, in spite of all that, maybe she didn't give me the right view of Christianity.
Yeah. Well, and I
That's
mean
really
that's
remarkable.
well, and I mean that's just God right there, just speaking
Yeah.
into it. Because I think by nature, like you said, we have an authority problem. So when we can
Yeah.
have an excuse to reject God, we often cling to that and run. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that was really the Lord just speaking throughout that year of wandering away and saying,
Yeah.
you didn't get this right. And I really like looking into details, facts, statistics, that sort of thing. So when he was speaking to me in that realm, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I didn't get this right. Maybe I didn't
Mhm.
go. I need to go to the source. And so that's what was so helpful. And yeah, I mean, he's just so faithful, and I'm grateful for that.
Yes, and I think it's worth reiterating that you went back to the scriptures. You wanted to check the scriptures to see. That's really kind of the key when you're
Yeah.
evaluating Christianity. Don't just evaluate what somebody says. Go to the source, understand the scriptures, and stay in it long enough to make sure you have a proper understanding of the full counsel of the word, in a manner of speaking. But I'm really glad you threw that in. Did your parents know for that year that you were chasing Wicca? Did they were they aware?
You know, my mom was because there was one time when I was coming up the stairs and I was wearing my pentagram and it happened to come outside of my shirt. I usually wore it under my shirt and she saw it and just kind of froze and she was like, "We're not having that in the house." And I was like, "Oh, mom, calm down. It's not like I'm into the dark evil stuff, right? Because there's this, oh, well, you've got, white magic and black magic. They try
Yeah.
to distinguish between the two.
Yeah.
It's no, 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 mom. Just calm down. This is I'm not into the evil stuff. I'm not worshiping demons, that sort of thing." And I just sort of, breezed past her and then just kept it hidden. And I think it was one of those to where I don't know if she knew exactly how to respond to it. So as long as I kept it hidden and I didn't make a big show of it, there wasn't really, I mean, it's not like I changed my dress or that sort of thing, to where I think for some point she could be like, okay, well, maybe Amy's past this. It just wasn't
Yeah.
anything that was engaged. And so I
Yeah.
tried I tried to keep it as well hidden as possible. But yeah, she was aware that there was something going on, but I don't think
Okay.
she quite knew exactly what
Sure.
what I was getting into.
It doesn't sound like she was alarmed, and, which brings me to my next question, actually, because I went through a brief Buffy the Vampire Slayer phase in my late 20s, but that show definitely left me with the idea that, the occult is creepy
Mm,
and uncertain and risky, but I don't think that's so much the case anymore. It seems like now the occult is portrayed as harmless
mhm.
or maybe beneficial, but
Yeah.
some sort of legitimate spiritual option. Are you seeing that too? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And so actually it was part of a Disney movie that really sort of green lighted that this was okay to go along with. So there was a Disney movie called Halloween Town. And it's this grandmother that comes in to this single mom and her two kids. And it turns out grandma's a witch. And the older girl who's about my age, she saw her grandmother doing this spell, and her grandmother gave her like this really amazing cloak. And I remember her in one scene, the girl twirls around in this cloak. She goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm a Wiccan." And she was so happy about it. And I remember thinking, oh, well, if Wicca is mentioned on Disney, well, that can't be a bad thing because it's Disney, right? Like
Oh my
Disney
gosh,
is
wow.
for kids. And so for my rationale, I was thinking, okay, well, if it's on Disney, then it must be okay. And we've seen this sort
Mm,
of shift where, yeah, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Craft, the occult was dangerous, right? It was often very
yeah,
dark and
yeah,
brooding, but now we're seeing it incorporated in more and more shows, especially with kids, more kid shows, and they're putting actual symbolism within there, like actual
yes,
Wiccan
yeah,
spells, satanic rituals, symbols. All of these things are getting worked into the writing. And perhaps maybe they're just seeing it from the perspective of, oh, well, we want to be more authentic, more true to the original source. But really, this is getting kids inundated with this
yeah,
iconography. And yeah, it's seen as something that's cool, it's fun, this is what sets you apart as an individual, as a young person. And then throw that in with what we see on social media. So I was watching this one girl, and she was showing you how to cast a spell to summon a demon, because
mm,
now what's being said is, well, there's all these different demons and these demons recognize or represent different forms of knowledge, and you can actually summon a demon to tutor you in a specific field. And I'm watching this video like, oh my gosh, she's just so cavalier about it. She was like
oh my
this
gosh,
cute little 20-year-old, and she's like doing like her little spell thing. And then it's ironic because she's like, well, now you have to be careful because demons are a little tricky and they might make you start to feel a little heavy, or they may try and take control of a situation. But you just do this little, she had like a little move with her hand and have a
oh
little
wow,
salt and that sort of thing, and it'll be okay. And
yeah,
I'm just sitting
don't
there
worry,
like,
you can handle
oh,
it.
you do not understand what you're dabbling with.
Right,
But yet
right,
this is now seen as something cool and trendy. This is a way that you can get a tutor. And then when you throw in shows like Owl House, which have little demons on there, and oh, they're so cute and fun and sweet. It's the subtle desensitization and normalization to kids to think, oh, well, the occult isn't scary, this isn't as intimidating, oh, this could be something cool and secretive, that I can do for fun. And it's no wonder that we're seeing like tarot cards being promoted as stocking stuffers for teenagers, because this is just a fun little religion that they can get into,
right.
and it's just appealing to young people.
Yes, it totally is. I don't think Darwin did us any favors on that either, because once he decided, or once he kind of persuaded the majority of people that there really wasn't, that this is just a material existence, that there was no
Yeah.
God, then that by extension means there's not really a demonic realm either, that all of
Mm.
it's just made up. It's all
Yeah.
friendly. It's all whatever you want it to be. It's just something you can choose to kind of dabble in because it's not really real anyway. So that has not helped us, I don't
No.
think. But I have certainly read in more than one place that Wicca and the occult is rising, that people are
Yeah.
getting into it more, that the numbers are increasing. I think maybe it has something to do with like what you experienced, the fact that these people presented it to you as something that really matches your name and your history and your interests. So, what, in your opinion, are the reasons maybe why occult is on the rise?
So there's a bunch, and when we were kind of chatting before the initial
Yeah.
podcast, it's hard to pick out which one has been more influential because they really do build off one another. I mean, one
Hmm.
of the nice things about the occult is that it gives off this illusion of tolerance because
Yes.
when you are in the occult, you're just pursuing after your path. And I mean,
Yeah.
this is something that our culture has been inundated with from Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey was arguably one of
Yes.
the most impressive televangelists on TV,
Yes.
and she loved having all of these different teachers come on her show for you to find your path. You're
Yes.
just meant to be spiritual. Whatever appeals to you
Yes.
emotionally, elicits feelings. If you are sincerely pursuing after it, well, that's okay. You're going to get to, whatever God, you're seeking after. And
Right.
so with our culture today that's so hostile, that's so inundated with social justice and this Marxist oppressor oppressee
Yes.
categorization,
Mhm.
Christianity falls within the oppressor category under social
Mhm.
justice. And so the occult allows an individual to shift out into the oppressee or the ally category because within the occult, well, you can just embrace other people, you can blend other worldviews. It offers this illusions of tolerance, and I'm just living out my path and you should live out your path. So there's
Mhm.
not that, for one, there's a lack of accountability and responsibility to a higher deity, and there is no pressure to evangelize someone. So that's off the table. And you appear automatically more gracious and tolerant than perhaps your Christian neighbor or Christian coworker. So there's that illusion of tolerance there. And then you package it in with feminism. And that's one thing that I've noticed, especially online, is a lot of these sort of occult groups. It's very
Mhm.
much a high female presence. And that makes sense. Women by nature, we're more relational, we're more drawn to the aesthetic, to beauty. And so when you can co-opt the creation to be now worshiped and now promoted as, oh, well, you're a woman, this is feminist empowerment. I mean,
Mhm.
there's an acronym going around that which actually means woman in total control of herself. So to be an empowered, autonomous woman, the occult,
Yeah.
Wicca, that sort of thing, New Age, this is a way in which you can now achieve that power. There's one gal who she's got her little group of following for Christian witchcraft, and what
Oh
she said
gosh.
is, that there is no God in the Bible. The God is in the mirror. Your God is in your mirror. So it's you. You are the God of that situation. So when you offer someone power within their own lives, control that they can make to exert their will rather than submitting their desires and dreams to the Lord and Father and
Mhm.
actually following after His will, no, I can take control of that myself. I can now look more tolerant and self-righteous to others. In fact, Jordan Peterson, he commented that, people can, one of the easiest ways for us to talk ourselves into something is to have the illusion of the moral high ground. And
Yes.
Wicca, the occult, gives that illusion. And then throw in the feminist empowerment, especially if you are a woman who perhaps has had bad experiences with maybe a male church leader, husband,
Mhm.
whatever that may be. This all exploits actual true hurts and then uses that to draw us away from God, not toward Him.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It really is very seductive and interesting on a
Yeah.
lot of levels. A
Yeah.
lot of levels.
Yeah, and
So
it's so much in teen culture. That's what blows my mind. So I
yeah.
go on Teen Vogue and they have so many articles on how to discern if you're a witch, how to go for this spell to get the boyfriend or bring about your will. I mean, it's a worldview that's being promoted because it one that it's easy to co-opt within, especially young women, and get them lured away from
Mhm.
Christianity into the occult. It's wild.
Yeah, it really is. And it just, when I was a kid, that would have seemed completely out of the realm of possibility. And so the fact that it is is becoming more and more central and more accepted. And it's like
Yeah.
everybody's walls are down. Nobody really sees it for the danger that it is. And
Yeah.
therefore everybody just sort of figures it's a legitimate option among many to choose. And it's especially as a woman to think that it's empowering to you as a woman. It kind of gets you outside of those expectations, the cultural expectations, and it kind of gives you your own personal journey, gives you permission to kind of pursue your own thing. That's
Yeah.
very, especially for a young woman, that's very intriguing and alluring.
Yeah.
So, which as actually kind of goes to right to our next topic of discussion, which is as Christians who are concerned about this, we kind of have a biblical view of what is really happening behind the scenes and how it's really not connected to anything good. Then what do we need to look out for? And how do we approach our friends or our family or our neighbors who seem to become interested in occult
Mm.
practices?
Yeah, it's so important for us to understand the why behind the interest.
Hmm.
Greg Kokel, he has great questions in his book Tactics.
Hmm.
When
Yeah.
we are to ask, okay, well, if they say that they're more new age or they're spiritual, not religious, that should probably be the first little eye opener there. If somebody says they're spiritual, not religious, that's where we need to pause the conversation and say, oh, what do you mean by spiritual? Because when someone is spiritual, when they claim spirituality, that can be a way in which they're meaning I'm actually into the occult because they're saying spiritual is in like I'm following a path, but not
Yeah.
necessarily the perceived rigidity
Yeah.
of Christianity. And so
Right.
that should be our first one. Okay, what do you mean by spiritual? And then the next question is, well, what led you to that belief? Again, that's another Greg Kokel question that's so
Yeah.
important because nobody adopts a worldview offhand. There is often a series, sometimes of very unfortunate events that have happened in their life to lead them to this conclusion, to lead them to believe that this is true. And it's those half truths or perhaps those hurts that have been wound around with the lies of the enemy that we have to now very gently untangle. And so, in having that good relationship where we can ask, okay, well, why do you believe this? What led you to believe that this is true? What do you find appealing about this?
Mm.
These are all questions that are not very intimidating for a person to answer because we by nature we want to share about ourselves. We usually have no problem explaining the reason perhaps behind our beliefs. And so asking those subtle questions, okay, well, why do you believe this? What appealed to you about this? And typically what it boils down to is they're either searching for something or running from something. So that's where
Mm.
when we're having conversations, we need to kind of have our sort of discernment radars just going like, okay, what are they searching for? Or perhaps what are they running from? What are they
Mhm.
fearful of? Perhaps it's a vulnerability. If they grew up in a very strict, oppressive church setting, they could be running away from perceived abuse. Like if I go and I become a part of a church, that's where I'm going to be vulnerable. That's where I'm going to be abused. And so we can rightly empathize with perhaps a bad experience, but then that's where we need to pull apart the truth from the lie and say, okay,
Yeah.
yes, some people maybe in this setting have hurt you in the past, but is that who the church is? Is that
Right.
Christ? Is that Christianity? So it's
Right.
recognize asking them, okay, well, maybe if they're necklaces, sometimes you'll see necklaces with either the all-seeing eye, it'll be a pentagram that they'll have on there. Even sometimes it'll be a full moon with two crescent moons on either side.
Oh.
That's usually iconography that they are into the occult in some way. And so you could just
Hmm.
simply ask, oh, I
That's
see your
significant.
necklace. What does that necklace mean? And get a little background. Oh, why do you decide to wear that? Oh, what do you believe about this? Get to know the individual while listening to their background, seeing what it is they're searching for, perhaps they're running away from, past abuses, past hurts, past theological misunderstandings. And then when we gather that information, then we're able to say, okay, I hear where you're coming from. I completely understand why you walked away from the faith or why you don't want to be a part of Christianity because of
Yeah.
that experience. But is that actually what Christianity is? And maybe we can even share some things that we've gone through to where we could be like, man, I've been exactly where you're at. Can I just share with you what helped me get through it? Because most people, if they're going through a rough time, they're looking for folks to help them through
Absolutely.
those valley moments. And so there's lots of opportunities for us to speak life into it. So yeah, look for necklaces. Maybe tattoos. I've seen on cars at times. You will see it's called the reed. It's if you harm none, do as ye will. That's
Yes.
sort of that occult Wiccan sort of phrasing. That's sort of the moral code. You can do whatever you like as long as you're not hurting anyone. Well, then that opens a lot of opportunities to, okay, well, what do we mean by hurt? And if we're actually casting spells to achieve will and manipulate our surroundings, isn't that actually manipulative and harmful to another individual if they're not able to interact with that in a certain way? And so there's lots of opportunities for conversation. Again, phrasing is really important. You will notice a lot of folks who will claim to be spiritual. And if they say that or use that phrasing, that's a great opportunity where you can ask, okay, what do you mean by spiritual? And you can
Mhm.
have great conversations. One thing I would encourage is you don't have to know everything to have a good conversation. If they ask a question or make a statement or pose a question to you, and you're sitting there and you're like, man, I really don't know the answer. That's okay. Be like, great question. Thank you for asking me that. Do you mind? Can I do a little research and maybe get back with you? And that now you have an open door to another conversation. And so there's a lot of really great flourishing that can happen within those moments if we have eyes to see what's going on around us and the boldness to speak life in this person's situation.
Yes, so many good things there. I love that you specifically mentioned that we needed to untangle the truth from the lies gently,
Mm,
because especially given the knowledge that we understand that they're probably hurt and seeking something, or they're
yeah,
fearful and seeking something. Like you said, they're either running to something or away from something, and so we need to keep that in mind and kind of just go slowly and gently, and have ask lots of questions and get lots of information. I think that's especially helpful here, but in general, that's the place where we want to take our Christian Bible study teacher hat off and put our student hat on and
yeah,
learn about the other person. It is so, full transparency, that's hard for me to do. That's something I really have to work at doing, is getting and being patient enough to ask questions and to know what questions to ask, because it's not always obvious, but it's a really good tool of the trade. So all
absolutely.
those insights are so good, Amy. Thank you so much for coming. This has really been an interesting conversation, really helpful conversation on what is basically kind of I mean, this is not the kind of topic that most people interact with every day. So this is super helpful. If our audience members or listeners, viewers, whatever, would like to find you, can you tell us where you are on social media that they could kind of just talk to you or comment or just kind of keep an eye on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Instagram. So it's salt, the letter N, grace, and then you got an underscore apologetics. So salt and grace underscore apologetics. That's how you'll find me on Instagram. And yep, I can be reached there. So if you've got questions, I would love to connect and help out in whichever way I can.
I love that. Thank you so much for popping into our little show today. I really appreciate that, Amy. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
so, for those of you who are familiar with Women in Apologetics, we have so many resources, articles, videos, social media, quick guides, courses, merchandise. So, for you to see what we have available and possibly to donate to the work that we do or just become a part of our Apologetics, just visit our website at Apologetics, APOLOCHIX.com. Thank you so much for staying with us and watching us today and joining us in this video. And we hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much.